All right, good afternoon, everyone. We are delighted to be here together today. This has been a long time coming. I know that we have for the last 2 or 3 years been talking about rolling out our planning and assessment Nuventive software, and we have taken an episodic approach to that and are excited to now kick off the program level assessment in Nuventive today. Our plan for today, we've invited Dr. Joel Michaelis to do a welcome and share a few words. I'm going to cover a few key areas that we've really are making some improvements, continuing to make improvements as part of our assessment of student learning process. And then Rod Rhodes will be walking through the program level assessment process, just some key points, reminders of what all that involves. And then the star of the show, Sarah Pegram, will be walking through and navigating how to go about entering your program assessment information in Nuventive. With that, I wanted to do just a couple of housekeeping items. If you would like to use the chat to ask questions throughout the training, we will have some time at the end for open question and answer, but we'll be monitoring the chat along the way to be able to respond to your questions and address throughout as needed. Sarah also just added a copy of the PowerPoint into the chat box. So if you'd like to download that right now to follow along, you're certainly welcome to. We will absolutely get that uploaded to Nuventive and sent out to you in an email later on as well. I'm so happy to introduce Dr. Joel Michaelis, who will share a few words and get us started today. Thank you, Dr. Michaelis, for being here.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying out some new earbuds. Can everybody hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Hey, for the most part, I just wanted to come on today. Shauna and Rod both invited me to come on and talk to you a little bit today, and I just wanted to thank you for being part of this process, and tell you one of the things that was kind of a priority for me when I started was to have conversations, quite frankly, with Rod and Shannon at the very beginning about where we were on assessment as a college, and kind of try to get the history of where we had been, where we are now, and where we want to go. I know there have been some challenges with it, you know, and there's challenges with getting it all down and putting it all down in an accessible format where you can run reports and you can see things, and that's where the excitement is of being able to use something like Nuventive. You know, that being the case, I think of this more, I guess, what I would share with you today is kind of my more philosophical ideas related to assessment. But I've been involved before as a VP of instruction, working with a faculty to actually introduce assessment. And when I say assessment, please understand, I am fully aware as faculty, you're assessing all the time. You are constantly doing that. The trick is us figuring out a way to aggregate that information so that you then can look at what you're doing at either the course level or the program level or the institutional level, so that you can look and see that, quite frankly, you can look at data to determine whether or not you're doing what you think you're doing. So right now, for instance, in a course, you've got a pretty good idea. Let's say you teach history, and you've got a pretty good idea that that you're teaching them, I don't know, the implications of certain political things and how it affected World War II and blah, 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 and you know, or maybe you're talking to them about the domino theory or whatever, and you've got an idea about how your students are doing that. But right now, if you're testing and you kind of anecdotally, you're kind of paying attention to how they're doing on certain questions and stuff like that. But once all of that is aggregated and you can really look at that, you can really pull out the things that are those course level or program level outcomes or whatever, where you can look and go, oh, wow. Sometimes, and some of you have probably already discovered this as you've been going down this assessment path with Rod and Shauna and all of this. You've probably already discovered some of this, because sometimes what happens is we take a look at something and we go, holy smokes, they are not getting this as well as I thought they were getting this. And that is the value of assessment. That's the value of what you're doing, quite frankly. Like I said, you all have a really good sense of your students. You know what you're doing, but it's those few little things here and there that maybe we somehow missed. That when you're doing this and you put it in something like Nuventive and you run reports and you're able to look at it in the aggregate, that we kind of catch ourselves and go, oh, and it's those few little things sometimes that it can actually help inform you and help you. It's a tool to help you know better how well you're doing with your students and with your program, and whether or not you're actually conveying and imparting all of the information and wisdom that you think you are. So anyway, all that to say, I'm very thrilled that you all are doing this. I appreciate it. I don't know if you can tell, but I think it's incredibly important. And for the most part, it's not to reinvent the wheel or anything like that. It's a way for us to capture what you're already doing and just make sure that we're doing we're doing what we think we're doing, and if we're not, that we know of the specific areas that we need to work on. So with that, I'm going to leave it alone. I saw who's on your list of speakers, and all I can say is I'm happy I went first, because I wouldn't want to follow them. So anyway, y'all take care. I hope everybody has a wonderful Zoom meeting here, and that you all have just a glorious weekend. I think it's going to be really pretty. So enjoy your time, and if I haven't met you yet, I'm looking forward to doing so. Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Michaelis. As you can tell, he's quite passionate about assessment of student learning. He had a conflicting meeting, so we're so grateful that he was able to be here for just a minute, but he'll be hopping off so he can make his next appointment whenever he needs to do that. But thank you for sharing with us, Dr. Michaelis.
Thank you.
So we've made a lot of progress and have had a number of changes over the last several years with SCC's planning and institutional assessment processes. So I thought I would take just a couple minutes to remind us what some of the differences and similarities there are between assessment and planning. As you all know, we are kicking off this year the SCC's second strategic plan. In a couple of weeks, we'll have some exciting additional information on what that means for us, and really dig into what that strategic plan is. The strategic plan and the college's mission drives everything that we do. Where the rubber meets the road, where the exciting, where the innovative, really highly innovative parts happen, is when the strategic plan and the mission are applied in our department level continuous improvement processes. On the assessment of student learning side, we have goals, outcomes. Rod will talk about that here shortly, but that's really focused on what do I want my students to learn, how will I know they're learning that, and how am I using that data to improve that student learning. And then on the map side of things, I know you probably thought, we just finished this. Why are we talking about it again? But the SCC's Mission Action Plan, our annual goal setting process, that's really focused on operations. What are the tangible, innovative, practical steps that my department can take to improve enrollment, student success, employee excellence, all of the strategic goals? That's where that application of what that means for your operations. And they're also, assessment and planning are also very closely related. And I'd like to share just a brief example. Some of you may or may not know that I used to be a faculty member prior to serving in this role. I taught and was in a similar role as you, as a department chair, for almost 5 years. One of our one of our program level learning goals was we wanted students to better identify as a professional. As they were going into their internships, we were getting a few more comments than we would like from some of our industry organizational partners, that they wanted they wanted our students to communicate in a more professional way. They wanted their phones not to be out all the time as they were trying to meet, and they had some comments on timeliness, etc. Basic common professional skills, as we all know. So we incorporated those into our program level assessment. In the first year, not surprising, the outcome data, the learning assessment outcome data, showed some pretty substantial opportunity for growth. And sometimes, as you know, you all have been doing assessment for a long time, that there's sometimes a blip in the data where you don't want to make drastic operational changes. And other times you realized we've got to make a change now. And so that assessment learning data, after the first year on the professional level goal, we decided it's time for an intervention. So we incorporated new assignments and new mapped in our curriculum where we were going to be emphasizing certain aspects of the professionalism. And then on the department side, on the operational side of our planning, of our goal setting for the year, we worked with the student organization club to develop additional events. We asked for some additional funds to be able to bring in some guest speakers. We did all sorts of things on the operational side of things to, again, strengthen that student learning outcome. And at the end of the year, sure enough, we saw quite a substantial increase in students meeting the minimum threshold of that outcome, and it really gave us some great data, great opportunity, and we heard very positively from our employer partnerships, from students really communicating how they identified as a professional, and just a really cool, I feel like one of my favorite examples of what that alignment and the power of assessing our students' learning and how we can make a difference on the operational side of things. Assessment we're never done assessing. That's the good and bad thing about assessment, is that it is a constant cycle of improvement. We're never going to stop planning. We're never going to stop assessing. We will never reach the threshold of done improving. That's, we always are wanting to strengthen what we do, what we offer. Related to this is we, as an institution, are taking a look at what our assessment process looks like here at SCC, and how can we make some improvements? How can we assess the assessment process to make some improvements? A number of you may have completed the survey. We did a survey partnered with Sam Houston State University just about a year ago. I think it was actually a year ago in October that we that survey went out. We'll have a separate presentation where we really dig into some of these results, because I think you'll find them fascinating and helpful. But there were a few key points that stood out to us in these 5 domains that the survey assessed. First of all, before I get to those three points, we had an incredible survey participation rate. We heard right away from the survey administrator at Sam Houston State University, and saying, whatever you're doing to get people to participate in the surveys, keep doing it, because this is, this participation rate is far beyond. He also, the researcher also commented on how faculty by and large seem to very clearly and articulately understand the purpose of assessment, why we assess students' learning, which in many institutions and many circumstances, having people understand the why is one of the first challenges, first and foremost. Out of that survey, there were 3 key areas that we have developed some strategies and some work around how to strengthen based on that assessment, culture of assessment data. So one of those factors, one of those things that came to light as part of the survey is making sure that that we understand why we're doing assessment, which is clear, but our motivation, doing some work and further understanding of that intrinsic level motivation versus some of the external factors. Do I do this assessment learning process because Rod won't stop emailing me, or the Higher Learning Commission says we have to, or do I really truly understand the value and the power that this has to make a difference for our students? So that was one of the key areas that stood out to us as having some room for opportunity. The most substantial feedback we got was around using assessment data to make institutional improvements. And so where one of the main reasons we're excited to kick off Nuventive, there's lots of great features that it has, but it will empower us to be able to have a better understanding of what's happening across the college and be able to turn that data into discussions with our departments, with our faculty, and from those discussions with our faculty, be able to take action as what we're going to do differently as a result of that assessment learning. So how we can improve our use and sharing of data came out as a key opportunity for SCC as well. And then finally, one of the other areas which I was excited to see and very passionate about is how can we better celebrate our students' learning and our collaboration among our teams for the assessment work that we do. So you'll see some changes throughout the year associated with this particular opportunity on how we can better celebrate and recognize our students' learning and collaborative assessment work. So we used that faculty survey and feedback from a variety of stakeholders to develop some next steps, to develop some plans. So this year you'll see some additional changes coming with collecting course level assessment data that complements our program level assessment. You'll hear very shortly, we about a year ago now, we worked with the faculty and student affairs group to develop institutional level learning outcomes that we believe that SCC are the handful of outcomes that we would like all students to experience as a part of going to SCC, as part of interacting with our student affairs and faculty administrative employees. With those institutional level learning outcomes, we'll develop benchmarks to be able to understand across the college where we are doing really well in those learning outcomes, where we have opportunities to grow. We have plans to, again, celebrate faculty engagement in the process and really recognize and create that culture of assessment that, that is so important to an institution's health. And finally, one of our reasons for being here today is to implement the Nuventive software solution and Canvas outcomes to help us be able to gather that course, program, and institutional level student assessment data. So many of you, lots of familiar faces on the call, I believe the majority of those of you have interacted and worked in the Nuventive software solution doing your map goals. After we rolled that out about 18 months ago, we surveyed you all and had, again, a really strong feedback. More than 90% of you responded that you were very satisfied with the Nuventive software solution. It's simple, it's easy to navigate. We'll now have the ability to connect and interact and work on our planning and assessment processes in one spot. So no more I'm going here for this, here for this. It's all going to be in the Nuventive software solution. We'll be able to connect to our, in a formal way, connect to our general education learning outcomes. So the gen ed teams will be able to run reports and understand what's happening college-wide with the JELOs. And those institutional learning outcomes, again, coming soon. We're just ecstatic to be able to share with you our one-stop shop for planning and assessment. And with that, I will turn the presentation over to Rod to talk through our program level planning process.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to talk a little bit about Nuventive and just the changes that we're going to experience from our previous model that was on the hub from 2010. Been a long time, so we're excited, as Shauna mentioned, that we're going to be able to do a lot of more different things with our data and across the college. I'm going to talk briefly about some assessment principles, just some reminders. For some of you, it will be old hat. For some of you, it might be your first time going through those. And then some real key things about an assessment plan, and that would be your SLOs. We'll talk about that a little bit. So basically, in assessment itself has not changed. All we're really doing is changing the tool, changing the format, but the basics are the same. Every year you'll complete your assessment plan. That's annual. You'll complete your assessment report. And for 2021, we're going to ask that you see if you can assess at least one outcome. And for the spring, another 1 to 2 outcomes. And of course, when you assess, you're going to find ways to do that. What tools will you use? Will it be a direct assessment, direct evidence, or will it be indirect? But really find, when you go through your assessment plan, what do you hope to accomplish? What do you really want to learn about your students? So assessment, basically, assessment has not changed. It's just the tool. In Nuventive, there are a couple of things that have changed. It's terminology, basically. Whereas before you had 4 to 6 program learning goals, they kind of represented what you wanted a student to learn or be able to do at the end of your program. That simply will be called program goals in Nuventive. Same then, you had program learning outcomes underneath each of those goals, a couple of them or more. We have renamed those to just say program outcomes. A slight change in Nuventive, whereas before, if you remember the hub format, tools and benchmarks were on the same field, the same area of that plan or report. In Nuventive, it's a separate field for each. You'll enter something for tools and then separately for what is the benchmark. Very minor stuff. And before we had not just assessment plans, we had an assessment report to emphasize probably the ongoing nature of assessment. We're going to call that a progress report. So that progress report is where you will enter your data, analyze the results, make your action plans, changes for next year, and so on. So just some minor things that have changed. Next, in assessment, we've talked a lot about so far, Dr. Michaelis did, Shauna mentioned, I think this software is going to allow us to do much more with the data. Our Word docs were okay, but software allows us to do a lot more different things. So when you're doing your assessment plan, you won't necessarily have to identify, this is my JELO outcome. You can identify outcome by outcome which JELO they really connect with. So that's a little bit of a change. Previously, as you know, we had everyone work on a 3-year cycle. It was pretty set. You'd assess for 3 years. Well, we thought, learning from other folks around the region, we thought a more flexible cycle would be a better way to go, because sometimes you were finding you could assess an outcome and learn what you needed to know in 1 year or 2 years, or in some cases, you wanted to extend it past 3 years to 4 years or 5 years. So for now on, the cycle will be outcome by outcome. So if you wanted to assess this outcome and you figured, after a year we know what we know, or this was really worded badly or whatever, change the outcome. So the cycle will be flexible per each outcome, not for all of them on the same cycle, and at the end, that 3-year summary. So you decide how long you want to assess each outcome. And then because we're going to be flexible, because we're going away from that 3-year cycle, remember we had groups 1 and group 2 and all of that. We'll no longer have any groups. You'll all be in the same boat, so to speak. Everyone will just have that flexible cycle. When your outcome has run its course and you've answered your question about what you're hoping to find out, you move on and you just keep going. So no more groups 1, 2, or 3. So the hub to Nuventive, pretty simple. Assessment remains the same. A few minor tweaks in terminology, a couple of changes in the cycle. Let's talk a little bit about deadlines. Now, COVID has really impacted us in many ways. So what we have for deadlines this year may or may not really be what it is moving forward. Part of why I like the Nuventive software is that planning, maybe even budgeting, and certainly assessment will live together and be streamlined and really tie together. So for this year, given where we're at in the semester, we're going to ask that in 3 weeks from today, your assessment plans, your updated ones for this academic year, should be completed. And because we're going to ask that you assess at least one outcome, we'd like those reports, those results due in December, give it to the end of the semester, and include what you did last year in 2019-20. Now, I do really want to make sure you realize you don't have to start doing your assessment plans on Thursday, October 29th. You can start right away. In fact, get them done quickly, post them, let us know they're done. You can collect information from last year for your assessment data, analyze it. And so for the outcome you would like to assess this fall, it could be one you started last year or even the year before. It could be a brand new one. It could just be a different outcome from your plan you haven't assessed yet. Completely up to you and your program. But pick one that means something to you, what's important, what you'd like to learn, and have that be for the fall or 1 or 2 more than for the spring. But again, due in 3 weeks, start right away, no need to wait. And I think you'll find that it's really pretty simple to update your plans. One thing I want to mention, not just about Nuventive, but Shauna mentioned the institutional learning outcomes, the ILOs. A team worked on those back before COVID. And they're really broad statements about what every student can demonstrate or practice as a result of a learning experience, whether in the classroom or co-curricular. And so then other outcomes will align to the institutional outcomes. Program outcomes will. Course will align to program and so on. So we really think this provides us some structure with how things will relate. They will provide that college-wide data that you've heard about so far just today. And that's one of the exciting things about Nuventive. It allows us to do more things with our data. So that's Nuventive. I want to talk briefly about some things just for those as reminders about really what's important about assessment. And it really boils down to that key question. At the end of a learning experience, a class, a program, what do you want your students to know or be able to do? The goal of assessment is to improve student learning. That's what it's all about. So when you assess, pick things that you want to find out about. You want to learn more about what they do know or what they don't know. And assessment answers that question. We're teaching this. Are they learning this? So really, how do you know? Well, we know because we assessed it. We collected some evidence. And I think Dr. Michaelis mentioned this, or maybe Shauna. It's ongoing. You're doing this all the time. What's working? What's not working? This is a means to collect that information, hopefully as simply and effectively as possible. This is evidence. Now, I like that word evidence about assessment. Ways to demonstrate to anyone else how things are going in your program or with your students. And don't be surprised if your results, your assessment results, sometimes people panic, oh, the scores are low, the students are doing poorly. Don't be surprised by that, because really what you're after is you want to pick something we've always struggled with, or we wonder why aren't they getting this, or why can't they do this skill. So it's okay in a sense to have those low scores at the beginning of your cycle, because then you can find ways to implement changes to improve the student learning. What do you do about it? So you assess, you collect that data, you analyze it, and then you respond. And as some of you know, data really is part of our life, and one of the things I'd like to talk about in terms of using the data. So what have you learned? What changes? And the thing about data, there's lots that could be gathered. You can't measure everything. You have to keep the reporting, the planning manageable, focus on what's really important. Because if you're not using it, really we're wasting our time. Almost stop collecting it, basically. So we want to use that data. You've heard me say this before, you're not writing the plans or the reports for me or for Shauna. Really, you're doing this for you. You are collecting that information to help your program, to help your students, and if you think about it, to help your students in the workforce, to help the employers get a well-prepared employee. Use that data to make a difference for the students. So when you use the data, really what does that mean? Well, some assessment lingo here, it's called closing the loop. So let's say you've assessed a certain skill and it does not look good, so you have to change some things. What can you change? Well, maybe it's your teaching strategies. Basically, you look around and you say, you know what, we need to change our pedagogy. We need to change how we're presenting this material. Or maybe it's the curriculum itself. Maybe it really doesn't reflect today's industry standards. Or our students need more support. Do they need tutoring, one-on-one, small group work? Or maybe it might even be our faculty. You know what, we need more training on this new piece of software, this new piece of equipment. Or maybe our equipment or supplies are not adequate anymore. Maybe the one-arm mannequin just doesn't cut the bill. So when you close the loop, what are you doing to help improve the student learning? And maybe it is just, you know what, this year the results were not good, but we thought we did everything right. We don't see anything we could change. Let's just conduct some further assessment. Let's assess that outcome again and see maybe if that group was, you know, sometimes just a not very good group. They didn't go to class or whatever. And again, the one other thing you could look at is the assessment. How did you assess it? Was your outcome worded strongly? Was it a really well-written outcome? Was your method, how you assessed it, the tools that you use really effective? Or maybe your benchmark was too high or too low. So when you close the loop, it's really all about how do we want to improve student learning? Here are some ways that we can address the gaps in what they can do. So we close the loop based on evidence. And that evidence is two different types. One is direct, where you see what the student can do. They demonstrate it. A project, a presentation, something scored with a rubric, written work. It could be test questions, a whole test or a quiz. It could be something in their clinical or a co-op, an embedded assignment. You see what the students can do. That's direct evidence of student learning. That really is a great piece of evidence to show and to find out what they know. The second type, still valuable, but not as hands-on, you might say, it's indirect. They reflect on what they learned. They describe it. Somebody else might describe it. So it could be a student survey, an employer survey, a graduate survey. It would be a questionnaire or a focus group. So really, it's just a way that upon reflection, what do I think I learned? How did that go for me? It's indirect, still valuable. But again, direct evidence is awfully important to prove student learning. So those key assessment principles, one, what do you want to know about your students? Two, it is ongoing. Using the data is key. And then find some evidence to find out how the students are doing. Third thing I want to briefly touch on is the key component of an assessment plan, your student learning outcomes. They need to be written really well, really strongly. You want to be sure that your SLO, that program outcome, is observable, you can measure it, and it's something the student can demonstrate. The focus is on the students and what he or she is doing. It's really a statement that answers the question, they know or can do what as a result of this activity, class, or program. So if you haven't written one before, or you need some practice in writing a student learning outcome, a little formula that works and is pretty effective, SWBAT. Students will be able to action verb something. Focus is on the students. The key is one verb, and it's clear as what you're expecting to be able to watch or observe them do. If your student learning outcome is read and interpret blueprints, is that 2 outcomes? Or is it interpret? If I can interpret a blueprint, I'm pretty sure I can read one. So really try and get the best possible verb that you can. And a great place then for a strong verb is Bloom's taxonomy. And it goes a little bit back to which verb captures what you're after, what level of learning. Is it the foundational knowledge and comprehension? Is it higher order application or analysis, or the highest order thinking, synthesis, and so on? What do you want to know about your students? So think about if I'm trying to, as an example, learn about a patient care plan. Well, what are the elements of that patient care plan? That would be knowledge. Okay, here is a sample patient care plan. Now apply it. That's a different level of thinking. Highest level, here's your patient, create one. You design one. So those are the different levels of learning. And so higher order thinking, probably towards the end of the program, will include the knowledge and the application and so on. So take a good hard look at your outcomes. And for some examples, there are good verbs to use and not so good verbs. That first one, understand the importance of cell growth. My question always is, what does understanding look like? The stronger statement says, oh, they're going to be able to explain it. The verb is the key. They will know about hydraulic brakes. I'm sure the transportation division doesn't want them to just know about the brakes. They want them to be able to service or repair or diagnose the brakes. And demonstrate knowledge, we do see that quite a bit. What are they doing when they're demonstrating knowledge? The stronger example is they're going to analyze, or maybe they're going to compare, or they're going to explain, or whatever they're going to demonstrate knowledge. What does that look like? So it goes back to that level of thinking. So what we'd like you to do, starting once Sarah goes through how to, is review your assessment plan. Look at outcome by outcome. Do they follow the SWBAT format? Student will be able to. Are they easily understood by someone not in your program? Even somebody from the Board of Governors, a prospective student, a current student, or a parent. Can they look at those and go, now I see what my student will learn in your classes and in your program? Would an employer like to see that and say, yes, that's the kind of employee I want? Look at your outcomes. Are they measurable? Are they observable? And are your tools and benchmarks appropriate, not just for that outcome, but for your program or department? I read through everyone's assessment plan as we transitioned into the new templates, and I still saw sometimes the word quarters and not semesters. So maybe they meant terms or whatever, but double check that your plan is up to date. And the last thing I'll talk about in terms of reviewing your plan, final course grades. Final course grades really aren't assessment, they are more evaluation. And that's at the end of the entire course. Lots go into that. Maybe it's even participation. And if you think about it, how many sections and teachers we have for English 1010, Comp 1. really no way to know that they teach the same, grade the same, assess the same. An example I came up with for today, let's say that I was taking a class in truck driving, beginning truck driving, and I got a C. I passed. I passed beginning truck driving, which is great. But if you looked at my grade book a little more closely, I got an A in going forward, and I got an F in going backwards. So that C, what does that really tell you or tell anyone else about that student's abilities? Well, maybe the outcome is can navigate an obstacle course or reverse into a loading dock. Much more specific. So make sure that you don't have any
Hello?
final course grades.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi. How you doing?
Good.
Someone needs to mute themselves.
Someone needs to mute, right?
Okay.
I'm trying to find who that is.
That's okay.
It's Phip. Phip needs to mute.
You think you'll be able to hear?
And you've heard me say this before, it's a really key part about assessment. Sorry guys, this is really not about you. It's not about evaluating faculty. This is about student learning. There are other processes in place, course observations or whatever, to evaluate faculty. So really, this is always about improving student learning. It's not about evaluating faculty. So again, I mentioned before, if your results are low, don't panic. It's really a good thing because now you can help improve that part of your program. After today's presentation, if you have questions, let me know. Email's probably best. And I think Sarah or Shauna will talk about, we're going to have some open labs the next 3 Fridays. And so there'll be time to come back with all 3 of us and ask questions. So that's a little bit of overview on assessment. And I'll turn it back over. I think, Sarah, as I heard, you're the star of the show, so you are on.
I am not the star. I think I just have the most slides. I don't think that makes me the star. That just makes me a little over exuberant with my PowerPoint.
Finger exclamation point.
All right. So were there any?
I don't know that question mark.
Oh, I think someone else needs to mute there. So were there any questions for Rod before we step into our Nuventive piece at this stage? I saw there were some in the chat, but there's nothing pressing right now. We'll go into navigating in Nuventive. So as Shauna said, there have been lots of conversations and discussions and preparation and build up leading up to getting program assessment out of Word documents and on the hub and into the Nuventive software, which most, if not all of you have been into and become familiar with through the MAP process. So what is Nuventive? Nuventive is our one-stop shop, as Shauna said. It's one place to go to keep your mission action plan, your MAP process, and your assessment processes. It allows you to make connections between planning and assessment. It's a simple, user-friendly interface. We had a lot of feedback, a lot of positive feedback around the software. When we surveyed folks after we rolled out the MAP process. And that was the feedback, was that it was pretty simple and user-friendly, so that was good. It also has really robust reporting capabilities, which gets to what Dr. Michaelis touched on at the beginning, which is that now that we are doing all of these things that, or not now that, you have been doing these things all along, and now we want to be able to capture that in a more robust data world. And the data visualization is built right into Nuventive. We have some of those pieces in the MAP process, and that will be coming on the assessment process in the future once we have more data in Nuventive to be able to create visualizations on. So while I'm stepping through this, I would encourage you, please do feel free to follow along, to log in, to look around your areas. to check out what's in there, to practice the steps that I'm going along. This is, I have it on PowerPoint slides so that it can be made available to those who could not come rather than doing a live demo. So this will be available to you afterwards. PowerPoint is not always the best way to step around and move in the software, but it is the easiest to share going forward. So I do encourage you, go ahead if you haven't already, to hop out to the hub, and under the quick links section, you'll want to click on Nuventive. And I will say that if you saved a bookmark to Nuventive on your own personal browser anytime before this past summer, that link will be different and it will not take you to the right place. So start over here in quick links. This utilizes our single sign-on process. So once you click on Nuventive on the hub, it's going to take you to a page that looks like this. And up in the top right-hand corner, you'll see the word sign on. Go ahead and click on that. So once you are in, this is where you land. It's going to take you to this, this sort of landing spot. This is probably familiar and comfortable to everybody who's been in it before, but if not, there's a lot of parts and pieces up here. And so the place that you will always want to start is up at the top in this bar here that has a drop down, big white bar at the top. And that is where you will select what area, program, unit, division you want to work in. So up at the top, you click anywhere in the white spot or on the down arrow, and it will pull down a list of all of the areas, the planning assessment areas and summary units that you have access to. When you click on that, if you see something you think you should not see, or you don't see something that you should, make note of that, and absolutely please send me an email, as we're still tweaking all of the user permissions and access. The summary units are where all of the division information lives, and then the planning and assessment areas, that's where you do your work. So summary units will always be read-only for everybody. Planning and assessment areas is always where you will do your actual adding and editing and so forth. So once you have selected your program assessment area, your planning and assessment area, the way you navigate around in here and open up a menu is going to be on that left-hand side. And there's a little 3 lines that in the tech world we like to call the hamburger. I don't know why. It doesn't look like a hamburger to me, but it's fun to say, I guess. So click on the 3 lines, that hamburger in the left-hand side, and it should reveal out from the left this menu with all of the options. And then after that, you will click on the down arrow next to program assessment. And that is going to reveal all of your program assessment options. So just as a refresher, before we step into the actual forms for program assessment, I just wanted to remind everybody of some basic navigation pieces that are going to be the same on every screen that you go to. Anywhere you see a green plus sign, when you click on that, you are adding a new whatever it is you're clicking on. So you'll be adding a new program goal, a new program outcome, a new assessment tool, a new progress report. If you see a green plus sign, you're adding a brand new of whatever you see next to it. Now, when you see some of these other icons, these are the ones that show up once you have entered something. So once you have added a program outcome, when you will be able to then go in and edit, copy, or delete it. So that's when you'll see these other little outcomes show up, is once you have added it for the first time. And just a quick reminder, if you are going to copy it, which is an incredibly useful feature, and I know many people utilized in the map process this past year, once you hit copy, the copy icon, that are the 2 pieces of paper, you'll be taken to a screen that looks like this. It looks a little more confusing than it actually is. It's really pretty simple. All you're doing here is telling the system which area you want to copy that outcome into. So most of the time, you're going to be copying it into that same program that you're working. So this is just an example of the test unit, and I would be copying this outcome into my same unit. It also allows for collaboration with other units, though, if you are cross-collaborating with another area, or you work on multiple areas and you're assessing the same thing across, you can copy that same thing into multiple areas. So back to clicking on the hamburger, and then you go down to program assessment area. It's going to reveal these options under program assessment, and these are all the different forms that will open up and all the different things that we're going to cover today. We will start at the beginning with your plan. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the assessment plan. So from your menu, when you click Program Assessment and then you click Assessment Plan, it takes you into this landing page. You can see here up at the top, you've got program goals, and halfway down you've got program outcome. Over on the right-hand side, we've got documents that are available as a resource. So already you can see everything is really nice and tidy, all tucked together on the same page here. So we'll start at the top of this page. We'll start up at the top with the program goals. And when you click into that, this is a really simple form. The top drop down is literally just numbering your goals. Program learning goal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it may be. And then this free form box, you can type as much as you want, and that is your overarching program goal. By separating the program goals from the outcomes, it allows later down the road, teaser alert, that you will be able to connect those. You'll make a link to those things. So you don't have to copy paste that into outcomes later on. You write your goal once, it's saved here, and then we make connections in the software in a different screen. So that's where you put your program goals, and the program goals are already preloaded for you based on whatever was in your most recent assessment plan on the hub. If those are not your current goals, feel free to go in and change away. So we'll step back out to our landing page, and at the top of the screen was those program goals, and now we're going to look down into the program outcomes. So underneath the program outcomes, there's those little triangles, we call them carrots, and when you click on them and it expands out. You can see here how the outcome is kind of set up. You've got an outcome, and then you've got assessment tools underneath. You can have multiple assessment tools supporting one outcome. And again, as a reminder, when you want to add something brand new, you're going to click on that green plus sign. So let's pretend I clicked on this green plus sign under program outcomes, and that takes us into our program learning outcome screen. So this is where you're going to go in and you're going to enter the overall outcome. Rod, was there anything you wanted to talk about here, tying back to that word template that you wanted to point out in particular?
No, it should make sense to everybody. It's the same where you would write the program learning out. It's the same basic thing. It's just a different look for the screen. So I think the more you do it, the easier and more second nature it will be. I'm an old dog and I've learned a new trick, and if I can do it, trust me, just about anybody can.
And we all need help with our new tricks. So when we do need help, the little question mark is very handy. It opens up field help on each one of these. So if you're not sure exactly what what is expected in this field on this new software, please click away on that green or that blue question mark, and it's going to give you a brief description of what you're supposed to put in that field. The other thing that I wanted to point out on this assessment plan screen are the status of the assessment plan. And this should look and feel very familiar to you. These are the same statuses that are used on the map side of the house. So this is meant for you to indicate where you are in the process of writing your program assessment plan. Is this a draft and you're still working on it, or are you pretty solid on it? You're ready for this to go into review. When all the review is done, go ahead and mark final. And then those other two are meant to capture if you had intended to do something, you had intended to move forward with an outcome, and things happened, hashtag because of COVID, right? It was deferred for whatever reason. You can indicate that you had done the work, you attempted to do that, but it's getting pushed off, so you don't just lose it.
Okay, so that is the outcome piece. And adding in the tools, Rod pointed out that before you had tools and benchmarks all in the same field on your Word document, and he noted that they're pulled apart. And that is so that you can put in multiple tools for each outcome, and there's obviously a benchmark for each one of those tools. So to add your assessment tool to your program outcome, you'll save your outcome and you'll return back to this landing page. And again, you'll click on the green plus sign if you're adding it for the first time. You'll click on edit, copy, delete. Those will show up. I want to also let you know that your most recent assessment plan has also been loaded into here. Sabrina Shinstock, our wonderful assistant, spent copious amounts of time copy pasting your assessment plans into Nuventive so that when it was time to roll out, you guys could hit the ground running, that you didn't have to spend a whole bunch of time laboriously retyping or copy pasting. We want you to focus on the work of assessment and not the work of copy pasting things that you've already done. So please, when you go in there, think a little happy thank you to Sabrina and then click on your edit button if you need to change something. But right now we're talking about tools. So let's assume you're writing your brand new plan for the next year, and we're going to click on the green plus sign to add a new tool. This is what your tool screen looks like. Pretty short and sweet and to the point, and you might wonder, why do I have to click a second place to talk about my tools when it's all part of my program outcome? And I will say, hang on to that thought, and when we get to the very end and you see the report that pulls all these pieces together, you will not be sad about clicking a second plus sign to add your tool. So this is your tool screen. The top field assessment type is a drop down that gives you a variety of options to just generally categorize what type of assessment tool you're using. Assessment tool and benchmark, this notes is just an optional field that the software wouldn't let us get rid of, but please feel free to use it for anything that you find helpful. It's there, so make use of it if you need to write notes to yourself or others about that particular tool. So this is, how did we get to this tool? Oh, I see that in the chat. Let me step back. Getting to the tool form is from this main landing page. So once you wrote your program outcome, you save your outcome, you click the button that says return, it takes you back to this main page. And then underneath your outcome, you'll see this assessment tools, and you click the green plus sign. So here is a picture of the drop down. So these are the general assessment type categories that are available. These came standard and we added a couple others. If there are things that you use that aren't captured here, we can add those in. Feel free to let us know. The other thing that I wanted to talk about that I think is real helpful at this point as you're thinking about your tools is this top corner here that are a bunch of squares that don't seem to make a lot of sense but are super helpful. What they do is they reveal for us what we are affectionately calling our right-hand resource center. So when you click on one of these squares, it changes how much of your screen is visible on the form as compared to these documents. And right now you can see in this particular picture, I've clicked this one that basically is half and half. And we have preloaded some things that we think will be helpful to you as you're working on your assessment process. We have your map reports here, your goals and results that you entered on your other screen, so you can look at those. We also have a PDF version. So while Sabrina spent a lot of time adding your plans in, we thought it would be helpful for you to see it how you wrote it originally as a reference, and also the report, that the last report that you had done as well. So those tools are right there. You shouldn't have to go back to the hub to dig up the last thing that you did. Now, not only are these pretty little icons, but when you double click on it, there's your actual form. So you can have your plan right next to what you're working on. You can see what you did last and make some informed decisions going forward. Or you can look at what you were doing in your map process and make just really great, strong connections with your assessment process. So speaking of looking at your map process, I wanted to talk about how to make those connections. So there's two ways to make the connections within Nuventive. One is to go back to your menu and click on the hamburger, and it's listed under Program Assessment and Connections. The other way is to go back to your assessment plan landing page, and you see this connections item settled right underneath your program outcome and your tools. And it is a little wrench. It is not a green plus sign because you're not opening up a form to type things in. It's taking you someplace else. And it does not make any difference at all which way you get to the connections. They both take you to the same place, which looks like this. And so this is a grid that lays out all of your program outcomes. And on the left-hand side going down is where you're going to connect your outcome to whatever it is you have on the left-hand side. Right here we have the program goals. And so I mentioned earlier, teaser alert, this is where that connection comes in. You just click a check mark into the box to say this outcome lines up with this program goal. And it allows for some really great reporting later down the road. You don't have to copy paste into each one of those things. You can see really easily how they line up. Now on the map side, I will say we did recommend that people would put their map year into the title of their map goal. Here we are recommending, for ease of use, that you make a visual numerical alignment. If you already know that you are going to align this program outcome with program learning goal 1, we do recommend that you start by giving it a number 1. Putting the number 1 in front of there, and then you can do a 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 if you have multiple outcomes that all support the same program goal. But this is just going to make it real easy when you come to this page to see for yourself how you wanted to line those up, and to see on reports how you lined those up as well. It's not a requirement, and the system won't force you to do it, but it is something that we found working in the system. It really made things really easy to understand and really streamlined, and we do recommend that practice. So that is how those your most recent assessment plans are set up in the system for you. So it's kind of a template for you going forward as well. So this is a picture of how to connect your program outcomes to your program goals. As Shauna mentioned, there's more to connect to as well. And so in that drop down, you also have, let me go back one page again. So here, when you click this drop down, it opens up these other options. You'll also be able to connect to general education learning outcomes and the SEC strategic plan. And once the institutional learning outcomes, those ILOs are approved, that will show up here as well for you to make connections to. And so again, I'll go back one screen. So again, you do that all in one spot just by changing this drop down. And your program outcomes remain over here, and then the left-hand side changes, and you just click your X's and you save, and you click your boxes and you save. And it's really simple and easy. So that is the assessment plan. I want to step into the progress report, which was previously just called your assessment report. It's called Progress Report in Nuventive. And again, we're going to go back to our left-hand menu. We're going to click on the hamburger, the 3 lines, and we see under Program Assessment, it's called Progress Report. Now, this is what the Progress Report landing page looks like. It looks a lot like the Program Outcome landing page. The easiest way to tell the difference between which page you're on, if you get confused, which can sometimes happen, I know from working in it, there's no program goals listed up at the top here. So that's your first clue. So this is where you land, and you'll see your program outcomes are all listed here. When you click on the triangle, that caret, it will open up, and what it shows below you are your assessment tools. So if you had multiple assessment tools connected to your program outcome, there will be one of these yellow boxes for each of those. So as a reminder, our green plus sign is always what we're going to click when we're adding something new. And since we're creating a progress report, that is always going to be new right now. So we're going to click on our green plus sign, and let's step into the progress report form. So this one is a little bit longer. But this top part of the progress report is just all your basic details, the date, who's completing it, academic year, your report status, which we'll talk about in a minute, your progress report year, and then whatever semesters you assessed or you are assessing for this particular tool. Now, I do want to stress that your progress report is written at a tool level. So you talk about your outcome in relation to a particular assessment tool in this form. And these are the status options that are available in your progress report. Rod, do you want to talk about these a little bit?
Sure. Just like before, when you submitted your assessment plan or your assessment report, the assessment team would review and through the use of a feedback rubric, look at each section and kind of provide some feedback, things they liked or had questions about. And so you had some peer reviewing going on in the previous format. Well, guess what? We're going to continue that, but with Nuventive templates that will line up exactly with the plan or the progress report, section by section. They'll just review it. It won't be a 4-level rubric this time. It'll really just be acceptable or improvements recommended. So really, they like it, or a couple of things you might want to do differently, and then some comments in terms of suggestions if they see anything. So we'll continue to have some peer reviewing going on and involving deans and associate deans to look them over as well.
Yeah, thank you. So that status is new. It's not something that was on your previous forms, but yes, that status pertains to the reviewing process, which we will look at briefly. We won't spend a ton of time on it right here, but I will show you what that looks like. So that progress report, now we'll get to the bottom half of that progress report screen. And this is where you put in your details, which courses you assessed, the number of students assessed, number of students meeting assessment, percent of students meeting assessment. And then benchmark met is yes, no, or partial. And then your analysis, and that's your free form box to talk about that. At the bottom of the page of this progress report screen, I should say, you'll see 2 pieces that you almost might miss if you don't scroll all the way down. The first one is action. So again, we're going to talk about the green plus sign. We're going to add something new. And the action form is what was previously, I'm sorry. I got ahead of my own slides. There's 2 ways to get to action. Just like there's 2 ways to add a connection, there's 2 ways to get to this action form. They both take you to the exact same place. One is at the bottom of this progress report form. If you don't do it when you're in that progress report and you save and you hit return, never fear. It is also available from this landing page. So you see you started to write your progress report, and now we have this action available beneath it where you can go click on the green plus sign. 2 ways to get to the same thing. And here's what that action form looks like. You might say, what is that? So the action screen in Nuventive replaces the box on the Word template where you would discuss your proposed changes. So we've broken those out into some more specific questions for you to answer and talk about. What we've done here, what Rod has done here that I just put into the system, talk about description of proposed changes or reason for making your changes. Are you proposing curriculum changes? Are you proposing operational changes? And these are yes or no. The operational changes, we'll say yes or no, and then ask you about if you're updating your MAP process as well. And then the results of the curriculum or operational changes you made last year, if that's applicable to this. These next 2 fields are where we get that connection between budget. We talked about connecting planning and assessment and budget. And while this doesn't tie to anything budget specific in Colleague or budget spreadsheets, what this does is it allows us to run reports and find pieces that have a budget impact. So we can see that and we can then go trace the specific finances if we need to. So these budget questions are the same questions that are asked on the MAP side. And then the bottom two fields on this screen replace the box on your Word template where you were asked to enter your year 3 analysis. So as Rod talked about, your groups, your group 1, group 2, group 3, when you got to year 3, you do an analysis of the last 3 years. So this final progress report, I do want to challenge you to think about this a little bit differently than you did on your Word template. Like Rod said, you're not in groups anymore. You don't have this 3-year box. Each of these tools, which is what you're writing your progress report about, each of these tools can be used for as long or as short of amount of time as you feel is appropriate to assess your outcome. So final progress report, you would select yes if you are done using this tool in relation to this outcome, or if you're done using it in this way and you're writing it in a new way. Rod, does that capture that appropriately? Add more here.
Nothing more to add. You did a great job.
Okay. All right. So then back on our progress report form, we also have a place to upload artifacts and evidence. So this is where you would upload really anything, any document, Excel spreadsheet, survey results, quizzes, tests, papers, whatever artifacts and evidence that you have to support this report about this tool in relation to the outcome. And so when you click on this wrench, it will open up a screen that looks like this. And this is where you're going to upload a document. You can click on the green plus sign and it'll let you navigate to anywhere on your computer and then load it. And once you do, all you have to do is you need to click and drag it over to this side. And that's how you tell the system, I want this particular document to be related to this tool, this progress report. And again, this is one of those things that looks a little more cumbersome than it actually is. It's pretty simple once you get in and move around, but it does look a little awkward at first. So don't be scared of it. And if you have questions, you know where to find me. Happy to help. So that is the progress report. That is where you enter your results for your previous plan. So now I want to show you what the program assessment reports look like. And so this is the part where I said, spoiler alert, you're going to be happy to click on multiple screens when you see what it looks like all pulled together. So we go back again to our menu. We click on our 3 lines, our hamburger. We go down here to program assessment reports. And it will take you to a screen that looks like this. You've got 3 options. One is the assessment plan, one is the plan and progress report, and one is the 4-column report. I'm going to start at the 4-column report because that's the one that's most different from how it's been viewed currently. When you click on 4-column report, it takes you to this screen, this report generation screen, and there's just a couple pieces that I wanted to point out to you. Most of this you don't need to worry about necessarily. You're welcome to do anything in any of those fields that you want to, but at the minimum, I would suggest that you pick an assessment year or years in this box right here. And then down at the bottom, the top 2 are automatically selected. I would also encourage you to select include fields with no data. And that way, if something is blank, it's easy to see, oops, I forgot to go fill that out. Or if for some reason you intentionally left it blank, it doesn't just look like a gap on your report. So those are the pieces here that I recommend, that you're welcome to add a logo, to search by a certain status, to look at report dates, whatever. Once you have that set up, go ahead and click on Open Report. And this is what the 4-column report looks like. This is what will be generated from what you have put in. And so I want to point out the things that we stepped through on the screen and show you where they ended up here. So right here, this first column, these are your program outcomes. And you can see just kind of down at the bottom, there's your second program outcome. And it's just really built left to right based on kind of all those stackable screens that we clicked into. So here's your program outcome. Here's your first assessment tool. And here's your second assessment tool. And both of them relate to this first program outcome. And as we were stepping through the progress report, remember we said the progress report is written about a tool. And now you can see why, because it's lined up directly after that particular tool. This is the test environment, so there's nothing down here. I just wanted to show you, but this tool would also have a progress report next to it. And then lastly, that action screen is a separate place to click into because it puts this in its own column nice and tidy at the end, and you can really watch the flow. Here is our outcome. These are the tools we're using. Once we are done with that, here's our report about how those tools, what happened with those tools. And now that we see how the students responded, what actions are we going to take, if any? And you can just really easily follow that left to right. The other report option that's available here is the one right above it, the program assessment plans and progress report. And again, it takes you to this same report generation screen. Again, I recommend picking assessment years or some other way to narrow the scope of your report. Otherwise, it'll be wide open, which is not a problem right now, right? Because we just have 1 year of data right now, but it will become in the future. So it's good to get in the habit of just putting in the year that you're interested in. Down at the bottom, this report also allows you to include all your connections visible in here. So everything you clicked on the other screen is going to be visible. Those connections will be visible on this report. And that is down here in this bottom piece. And you will need to click on that to add it. But once you have made all your selections here, you'll click the yellow Open Report button. And this is what your program assessment plan and progress report looks like when it's not in the 4-column. And this probably looks and feels pretty familiar to those of you who have done the map process, because it's the same layout as on the map side with the goals. You can still see all of the same information is there. You've got your program outcome, you've got your various assessment tools, and lined up underneath the tool, you have your progress report and your actions. So there is still a flow to it. It's just a different way of looking at it. And some people, this makes more sense, and others, it makes more sense left to right. So take a look at both of those and see what you think about each of those pieces. So we only have 15 minutes left. I know this is kind of going through real quickly on a brand new software system, but please know that this is all going to be available. We're going to send you the PowerPoint. I'm here for questions. Rod's here for questions. I know we just kind of zoomed through it, but this is meant to be a high level. Let's take a look and just show you what it looks like, right? So that's what we're doing with the feedback forms as well. We're not going to deep dive into it. Just wanted to show you what it is, that peer review feedback process. So back to our hamburger under program assessment, there's 2 separate forms. One is feedback about the plan. One is feedback about the progress report. And this is what the rubric looked like, just as a refresher on that peer review feedback. So going from that into this. In Nuventive, this is what your feedback form is going to look like. There's a top portion and a bottom. This top portion is your peer review. Just like Rod said, this has been streamlined and simplified a little bit, that each of these questions are just going to be either acceptable or improvements recommended, with a free-form text box to talk about if there's improvements recommended, what that means or what they'd like to see, and then a final overall recommendation from the peer review team, from the assessment review team down at the bottom of just generally improvements recommended or acceptable. And then this is just a quick snapshot of the progress report feedback form, slightly different questions, obviously, but similar look and feel, still has just the drop downs with acceptable or improvements requested or recommended. I also wanted to point out that this is really handy on this type of form. This shows you who it was last modified by and when. So if you have multiple peer reviewers in here, you can see who was the last person to touch it. So that was kind of a nice feature. And then finally at the bottom of these is a free-form text box for supervisor review. So once the peers are done reviewing it, deans, program directors, whoever is the next level, will take a look at the feedback form. They'll take a look at either the plan or the progress report and just type some free-form feedback here and then the date that they looked at it, just to know that they're participating in this assessment process together with all the faculty. So I've got kind of rounding up some tidy ends here with some frequently asked questions related to Nuventive. And then we'll open it up for questions just in general. These are some things that get asked a lot or that will be helpful just broadly about Nuventive. So first and foremost, your most recent assessment plan, like I mentioned, is available. Whatever was on the hub is what was manually entered into Nuventive, as well as the PDF versions of both the most recent assessment plan and your assessment report loaded into that right-hand resource center for you to open up, review, compare alongside your work going forward. Some things to know about Nuventive: it works best in Chrome and Firefox. It absolutely does not work in Internet Explorer. It just looks like it sits and spins. Edge is a little iffy, so we don't recommend it. You're just going to have a much better, smoother experience if you use Chrome or Firefox with Nuventive. Also, the access and user permissions may need to be adjusted. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me or Rod if you have questions about what you're seeing or not seeing, or you want to add more people to see things. It's really easy to tweak. Just let us know. We made our best effort at getting everybody in the right places, but we absolutely might need to tweak everybody. And then just a reminder again that I mentioned earlier, if you did happen to save a bookmark of Nuventive to your personal browser prior to this summer, please go through the hub and either resave a new bookmark or always go through the hub, because there was an upgrade and that link doesn't work anymore. Also, just a reminder, a question that sometimes comes up is related to the filter icon. That's very helpful once you start getting more years added on top of it. Like right now, there's only 1 year worth of program assessment plans in there. But as we go forward, it's going to be really helpful to use the filter to just look at what is relevant to what you're working on right now. So this is just a reminder, you do have that option, and it is this blue filter icon. If you see a red box around it, that means you currently have a filter in place. So if your page doesn't look quite right, you're not sure why, check up here at your blue filter box and see if you have a red outline. You might have filtered and forgotten about it. And in order to take that off, when you click that blue filter, you'll get this big blue box that shows up, and you'll click clear filters wherever you have a filter, and then you'll see everything all again. One other reminder is on the reports. Nuventive does use pop-ups to generate those reports. So if you have not generated a report using Nuventive before, and even sometimes if you have for whatever reason, if you click open report and it looks like it's doing nothing, it is because you have pop-up blockers. And I think that's just kind of standard that SCC puts on most people's browsers, but you can allow pop-ups for this site. In Chrome, you'll see that by this little red X right next to at the end of your URL. And when you click on it, it will give you this box and you'll say always allow. You want to always allow pop-ups from Nuventive. And then the very last thing that I wanted to let you know about before I hand it back to Rod is if you see what looks like a very scary and daunting timeout error message, unauthorized access, don't be scared. Nobody's watching you. You didn't go to a wrong website. It's just kind of a poorly worded error message that says you've let this sit idle long enough and we kicked you out. So the friendly folks at Nuventive said, yeah, we know that's not the best, but we haven't been able to change that just yet. When you see unauthorized access in a big black box, just click your refresh button up at the top and you'll be back in business. So don't be scared by that. It was a little alarming the first time we saw it. So, all right, that is it for me now. I'm going to hand it back over to Rod to kind of wrap us up with some reminders and open it up to questions.
Well, before you hand it back to me, I'm hand it right back to you. Any real quick questions for Sarah, just in terms of entering things? She did a great job. It just takes a little bit of practice to get used to the fields, or if I click this, what happens, the return button, the save, and all of that. So I'll just stop for a couple seconds. Anybody had really anything immediate that just popped in their head?
It's like with map, it auto saves as you're typing and everything, right?
No, you have to click the save button.
You'd save and then, okay, and then
Yeah.
return.
You do have
Okay.
to click save. Good question.
Okay.
Well, you see at the bottom of that screen about questions. I'd be happy to answer, especially questions about writing SLOs or anything that would maybe make your plan even more effective. And Sarah, again, knows the back end, the software side way better than I do. I have learned a lot. I still sometimes wonder what I'm doing when I look through a plan or whatever. I really think it's helpful. It was for me, because your old format is right there where she indicated on that right-hand resource center. It helps you see what you put previously and where that landed in the assessment plan for 1920 in Nuventive. So you can kind of make that little jump. Oh, that's where that goes. I see where this goes now. That's where it was before. I think that resource will answer a lot of questions, remove some doubt in your minds. And then after a while, you'll put that aside. You won't even worry about it. So use the old stuff to kind of guide you through to make some updates. But I think it'll come pretty naturally. It's really laid out well. And again, most of you are familiar from the MAP process as well. And in terms of this academic year, 2020 to 21, we talked about one outcome in the fall, one or two more in the spring. We don't have groups anymore, but some of you last year were in year 2 or maybe year 1 of your cycle. You may have outcomes you want to continue. So you may not have to create a new one. You just have to indicate, I'm going to assess this one or whatever. For some of you who ended your 3-year cycle last year, you may have to come up with a different choice or a brand new one. So that might be a little bit different, but you're going to do that anyway. It's just a matter of doing it in Nuventive. I mentioned, and we will have some open labs the next 3 Fridays. Friday the 16th from 12 to 1. So I believe Sarah, Shauna, and I will just be available together, just kind of like we are here. If you want to pop in and ask a question and duck out, that's great. The following Friday, the 23rd, from 1 to 2. And then the last Friday, the deadline Friday, hope we don't have too many of you, the 30th, also from 1 to 2. But I know these guys are available as well during the week. Shoot me an email. Let me know what your questions are. Happy to answer. A lot of information, but digest it and see what questions you have.